Well, happy Father's Day weekend, everybody. It's good to be with you. I'm Eric. I'm one of the pastors here on staff. And welcome to week 2 of At the Movies. Last week, Jeff did a great job of getting us going with Super Mario Brothers. Let's go. Woo-hoo. That's all I got. I have young kids. I've seen that movie way too many times, so that you just got to go with me on this one. This week, we are going to take a hard right turn deep into the world of sci-fi, which I know excites a number of you, and a number of others of you are looking for the door. So stick with me for a moment here with this. And we are gonna do Dune Part 2, which, yes, you heard me right. That means I'm going to spoil 2 movies for the price of 1 this weekend. You're welcome. But it's actually really hard to spoil either of these movies for a number of reasons. These are both amazing cinematic experiences done by an expert filmmaker named Denis Villeneuve. He's a French filmmaker, director, amazing. There's an immersive score and soundtrack that, man, it just demands to be seen on the biggest screen with the best speakers. We're gonna give our subwoofers a test this evening or today as we test through it. And there is a complex plot that honestly, I couldn't spoil for you even if I wanted to, because a lot of it is deep. There's some stuff that's strange, even a little bit weird. But with that, the reason why we are doing part 2 this weekend is that the movie has a lot to say about something that many people in our society are thinking about, and that is the role of religion. You know, one of the online reviewers that looked at the movie, he remarked that the Dune Part 2 is really an artifact of a post-Christian age. And what he means by that is he says that it gives voice to a growing number of people who are really open to spirituality, but are really skeptical of institutional religion. And surveys back this up, that more and more people are not actually a part of any kind of organized church gathering or any type of religious gathering, but still maintain their spirituality at the same time. And when surveys talk to them about this, they all remark that a lot of times it's because of what they see as hypocrisy, or that they feel like religion, particularly institutional religion, can be a smokescreen for power and for control. You know, power and control are dicey concepts, and that's what we're gonna be talking about today. You know, on the one hand, I think most of us feel that if we had more influence, that we would use it for good, that the world would be a better place. And yet, on the other hand, the track record for people that have a lot of influence and a lot of power is not great. It is so easy to go off the rails really quickly, where as we gain more influence, we actually have a danger of becoming a worse version of ourselves, or in the words of Jesus, to gain the whole world, but actually lose ourselves, our souls, our very self in the process. And unfortunately, this is incredibly applicable to religious and religious leaders. That the history for Christianity and Christian leaders is not particularly strong on this, that there are many times where we have not resisted this pull to power. And so as Dune Part 2 raises these questions about power and influence and religion, it is clear that these topics have resonated. It is 2024's highest grossing movie still. And so we're gonna dive into the story today, and I want you to stick with me for a moment because it's gonna take a few minutes to set up the story. But then after we set up the story and get into it, we'll turn to Jesus, who offered a much different way of handling power. And as a result, people who were very skeptical of religion were actually drawn to him, and we'll see why. So to get us started, I thought it would be amazing for us to start with one of the movie's most epic clips that I've ever seen. And again, watch out for the speakers. It's gonna be great. It's gonna immerse us in the world that the story takes place. It's the planet Arrakis, which is a very deserty, hot, hostile environment. As we'll see here too, they have a bit of a sandworm problem, or actually a major sandworm problem. And so for reasons that I will explain in a moment, our hero, or at least the main character of the story, Paul Atreides, is going to attempt to ride a sandworm. Let's watch. So now you could say you've seen a sandworm in church. See, there you go, you're welcome. Now, maybe you were like me and the first thought you thought of when you saw this is sandworms have come a long way since the movie Tremors. Does anybody remember Tremors? You know, I've never seen Kevin Bacon with a cowboy hat riding something that looked like that. And again, about half of you get that and the other half are younger than I am. So good for you on that. So why on earth would Paul, the main character that we saw in there, try to ride a sandworm? Well, I'm glad you asked. In part one, we meet Paul Atreides, who is the son of a leader of a great group of people called the House of Atreides. In Dune, that's how they refer to nations, is by the house, by the name of the leader that leads that. And so Paul is the son of the leader of this great big nation. And throughout his whole life, Paul has been subject to different rumors that he has been destined for some type of greatness, though he doesn't really know if he buys into that, and he's not really sure about any of that. And so as he's wrestling with this and kind of coming into his own, the House of Atreides is called upon by the emperor to go from their home planet to Arrakis, to the planet world that we just saw, to bring order to it. Arrakis, while it's hostile and not a place that I would probably want to live, is actually a place of immense strategic importance. Think of it kind of like a holy land of sorts that's frequently being invaded by this regime or that regime. And so not long after Paul's nation goes to this planet, they are actually ambushed by a rival, by a violent group of people called the Harkonnens. And the Harkonnens come upon them and in a brutal and vicious attack, wipe out almost everybody in the House of Atreides. And so Dune Part 1 ends with Paul and his mother, the only known survivors from that vicious attack, fleeing into the desert to seek refuge with the native people that are out there. They're called the Fremen. We just saw some of them in the clip there. Paul's hoping that he can join forces with them because they have a common enemy. The Harkonnens have oppressed them for many, many years. But Paul's arrival out there is also pretty complicated too, because the Fremen have long had some kind of prophecy that this outside world prophet or savior, they call him the Lisan al-Gaib, would come and free their people from oppression. And they feel like they see Paul having signs that he might be this outside world savior. And so part 2 is Paul wrestling with his identity. It's him trying to join forces with the Fremen, which one of the ways of the initiation process is to actually ride a sandworm. So check, he's done that. It's on the resume. But with this, he's also wrestling with whether he should live into this narrative. A narrative that he's not sure he actually believes, that he is this prophet, this savior that's come to free the people. But as we journey through them with this story, not all the Fremen buy into this prophecy. Some of them are actually really skeptical of it, and they're skeptical of Paul. And one of those is one of the main characters. Her name is Chani, played by Zendaya. And we're gonna hear about her skepticism. Let's watch.
What are you guys laughing about?
Don't bother.
You don't believe in all this?
No, we don't.
These are all Southern beliefs.
Southern beliefs?
Southern tribes believe a Messiah will come to deliver us from evil.
You don't believe in the Lisan al-Gaib?
We believe in Fremen.
Bilal Kaifa.
You want to control people? You tell them a Messiah will come. Then they'll wait for centuries.
So Chani's beliefs, what she expresses there, echo those of many throughout history who have said that religion is really a means of control. It's for weak-minded people, and that people in power can use it to control other people. And in the universe of Dune, Chani has good reasons for her skepticism. There's actually this mysterious group of people called the Bene Gesserit. In fact, I think we have a picture of them that we're gonna pop up on the screen. For some reason, this is all, it's a group of all women. I'm not really sure why, but these are just some gal pals out for an evening stroll. Not creepy at all. But actually, this group of people on the outside present themselves as religious leaders, but behind the scenes, we see that they're actually kind of puppet masters, where they have a lot of special skills and talents, and yet they use those special skills and talents to keep plans in order and make sure that they're always in power, and they're always kind of behind the scenes, making sure things are happening, including creating religious narratives that they don't actually believe, but they want to use in order to stay in power. And this is significant because Paul's mother is one of the Bene Gesserit. And so in the next scene that we're about to see, she's actually gonna try to perpetuate this narrative that Paul is this prophet. And the way she's gonna try to do that is by surviving a potentially deadly ritual that the Fremen have in order to perpetuate this narrative. Let's watch.
Dora Shash, Sula Hatzlik in the Hotel Siege. Shasha Hosaborat Machine. Pukala listen al gaib, Pukala ikara dekera maika. Kihoveji, Kitlasa. Demonash, Shihalad the big Hosochi.
Oh, Magda, ha, Fremen!
Shasha Hosabotage Mercy.
She's right. She's right. It's no miracle. My mother was trained to do that. Poison transmutation is something advanced Bene Gesserit can do. I'm not the Mahdi. I'm not here to lead. Nezi Hajaga, Giftak. Let me fight beside you. That's all I'm asking.
The guy is niet teken about Kudanesh Nokum. The Danesha, Nicole, and Nayanuk. Poeverex net. Oh, Gisla.
I actually find that scene fascinating because you've got the same event, but two vastly different perspectives and interpretations of what just went on. Isn't that kind of our world right now too? You've got Stilgar. He's this guy that has the big beard. He's one of the true believers, the Fremen believers who's bought into the prophecy. He's portrayed as a noble guy throughout the movie, but he's also kind of naive, particularly with what you know about the Bene Gesserit. And you contrast that with Chani's character, someone who's very strong, but also kind of only believes in her own strength. I don't know if you're like me, but as I was watching that clip, I felt a tension inside too, because quite honestly, both perspectives make me feel uncomfortable. Like on the one hand, I admire Stilgar for his conviction. And yet none of us want to be manipulated. Nobody wants to be naive. And when it comes to my own personal faith, like I have good evidence and good reason for why I believe. I don't want to just be, some smoke blown over me. Like I want to know that, hey, this is what I believe and it's grounded and it's real. And so that kind of made me uncomfortable. And yet on the other hand, Chani, while I'm inspired by her strength, I also know that, man, there's gotta be more than just like my own strength to get things done. And I don't think I'm alone with that. I mean, again, I think in our world today that's hungry for spirituality, most people believe that there is something greater than just our own strength and perspective, that there's a greater story to be shared. But with that, I also have seen too, when it comes to a Chani perspective, at least in my own life, how quickly I can go from skepticism to cynicism, to where I go from maybe some good questions and some challenges and some doubts to actually, if I'm not careful, not really believing in anything and almost moving towards inaction and pessimism, and I don't want that in my life. It's why in the movie, I'm actually really inspired ultimately by Chani's character, and we'll see more of this. Because while she has some good questions and good reason for her skepticism, she's still in the fight. She's actually still in the fight with Stilgar, which is an amazing observation too, that there's common ground around the common good. We've actually noticed this even as a church, that we've joined forces with people that aren't even sure if they believe what we believe, but there's common things that we can work towards. It's also, I'm glad that she's open in her as a character. We'll see this in a moment. And I want to stop for a moment to say this to those of us in the room too, that that have good questions in our life, that are actually maybe even a little skeptical of this whole church thing. And I wanna say, I'm inspired by you. Because the fact that you're here, whether you're in this room or watching online or engaging with this content in some way, that's a sign to me that you haven't let skepticism turn into cynicism. That you've stayed open and you're like, man, I wanna see what's out there. That's a beautiful perspective to have. And so as I'm inspired by Chani, she has good reasons for her skepticism, but as we'll see here in this next scene, she's actually open to Paul. She's open to him because of some of the traits he displays, particularly his humility when he goes about trying to learn the ways of the Fremen. Let's watch this next scene.
If you wanna fight with us, first thing you must learn to be one with the desert. So here is a tent and enough food. I want you to cross that small erg and come back. Travel by night. You know how to use a paracompass.
Yes.
Oh.
Anything else I should know?
Beside the worms and the Harkonnens, beware of the trapdoor spiders. Centipedes are very nasty. Not the big ones. They're harmless. But the little ones, you have to worry about. And don't ever listen to the Jinn.
The Jinn.
Jinn, desert spirits. They whisper at night. They can possess you. Really, be careful. They are demons. But it's true. Don't listen to them.
شغل هي كلام كيرا شاستل گازورو ايش هو ما جيف شيء
ناس شيء روح على دقيقة يفترشهم الناس يهود شيء روتشي نبراتش شوفتيه
also same like Sadozia Minazi Odeji.
So watch out for those little centipedes. Just be careful for those ones. So Chani is way turned off to all the stuff the Bene Gesserit are selling, but she's open to Paul. Why? Because of his humility and his sincerity. Two traits that always draw us in. When you think of the people who have made the biggest impact in your life, I'm betting it's because they modeled those two traits. And 2,000 years ago, these were traits that were hallmarks of Jesus' ministry. Why people who had been so turned off to some of the things that were happening in religion at the time were drawn to him. In fact, we see this in the opening act for Jesus, that before Jesus came on the scene, God used a guy named John the Baptist to start a revivalist movement out in the wilderness of Israel. And the fact that he used him to start it out in the wilderness is significant. Because at the time, if someone was expecting God to speak in a new way or to do something major, they would have expected it to happen in the center of Jerusalem at the temple, because that was the main place, the centering space of God's activity. But the temple had become so corrupt, it had become so obsessed with power, so full of legalism, that God said, hey, I'm gonna start a movement, but it's not gonna be there, it's gonna be way out in the desert, in the wilderness, through John the Baptist. And so all these people start to flock to John the Baptist because he's saying something that's so unique and different than what they'd heard by the religious leaders at the time, that the religious leaders actually got curious. They're like, hey, what's all the ruckus about? And so they send some of these leaders out to go check out what's going on. And John sees them from a distance, and what he calls them, he says, you brood of vipers. That's in Matthew 3:7. You brood of vipers, not exactly a ringing endorsement of everything that was happening at the temple at the time. And the people who had been discounted by, who had been dismayed by the temple, were drawn to the message of John. And these were the people that formed the movement that started to rally around Jesus because they were drawn to him for the exact same reasons. In fact, when Jesus entered onto the scene, his first act was that as an adult in his ministry is that he asked John to baptize him. An incredible act of humility for any leader, but particularly for those of us that believe Jesus is God, for God himself to enter on the scene and to have someone that he created baptize him is an incredible sign of humility. And then as Jesus began to teach, he taught with such sincerity where people knew that he had no other agenda, that he was for them. And for them, he was for everybody. Not just people that were in positions of power, he was for those people that had largely been counted out or who were called unworthy or didn't have a lot of social status, the poor, the marginalized, those that were kind of downtrodden. These were the ones that he taught that had incredible value and invited them into his ministry. And so he drew people in and the crowd started to grow because of this humility and sincerity, which in our world is so rare. In fact, that's the thing that makes us draw in most of the time anyway, is when we see this kind of humility and sincerity, it's because that's not the way the world tends to work. It's almost like it goes against the grain of how most of society functions. And Jesus warned about this because as he is going about his ministry, he wanted his followers, including us, to know about this dangerous pull of power that can happen to any of us. And he talked about this in a key chapter in Mark chapter 10. And in this chapter, Jesus started teaching about how he, the Messiah, the Son of Man, was going to have to make the ultimate display of humility and sincerity, where he would go to the cross and die for the sins of the world. And the disciples didn't quite understand this, because in their mind, they had grown up with this idea that the Messiah was actually going to be a great military leader, as somebody that would free them from the oppression of the Roman Empire, which was overseeing them. So they had no concept in their mind that the Messiah would be someone who would die, particularly die on a cross. And so when Jesus is teaching this, it's almost like they kind of brush it off. It's like, oh, silly Jesus, you're talking crazy again, and just kind of put it into a category. And we know this because immediately after that, they kind of start going back to this idea that Jesus is going to be this great military leader. They start saying, hey, Jesus, when you come and bring your kingdom, when you're kind of in control and in power, like, can we be at your right hand and your left hand? They start jockeying for positions of power in this new kingdom because that's what everybody wants, is more power. And so in this key moment, Jesus calls time out. And in Mark 10:42, this is what he says to them in this moment. Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Basically, the rulers in the Roman Empire, the empire that you see all around you, you see how they use their power. And their high officials exercise authority over them. And then with these 4 words, he'll change their trajectory of their lives, and he changes the way that you and I should approach everything in our lives. And he says he says, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man, Jesus, the Messiah, did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as ransom for the many. What Jesus is saying is that every other kingdom operates by different rules and with different tools than his. The different rules of these other kingdoms are that power, or that might makes right. And that when you have power and position, you have those for the benefit of you and for your purposes. And the tools of the kingdoms of this world is things like intimidation, where you use or I use any type of strength or resource I have to overpower you. Or manipulation, where I use whatever intelligence or skills I have to outsmart you. And what Jesus is saying is his kingdom is the exact opposite of that. That instead of intimidation, it's humility. where we think whatever resources, whatever strength I have, I will use them to uplift you and to serve you. And that whatever skills I have, whatever smarts I have, I will use for you. And that instead of manipulation, it's sincerity, where I have no other agenda, no ulterior motive, except to be for you. Now, all of that sounds great. I mean, again, humility and sincerity are beautiful traits that draw each of us in. The challenge comes is when the rubber meets the road. And when we feel like we need to accomplish something, especially if it's something kind of good, and this little voice starts to come in our head that says, well, you know what? That's not the way you're actually ever gonna get anything done. Like that little voice pops into my head every time I get onto the freeway heading downtown. Like the little voice saying, you know, that's cute, humility and sincerity. You think humility and sincerity are gonna get you into Dallas right now? You're gonna need a little bit of intimidation and manipulation to get your way there if you're gonna get anything done. Because that's the pull of this world and the challenge that you and I face. And it's a challenge that Paul Atreides faces in this movie as well. That in a key moment in the movie, he comes to the realization that if he wants to get the revenge that he so desperately wants, the only way to get it against the Harkonnens, the people that had killed his people, is to become like the Harkonnens. And so in a key moment here, he will use some special skills and talents that he has and embrace intimidation and manipulation. He'll fully embrace this idea that he's the Fremen's Messiah, even though he's not 100% sure that he is. And I need to warn you before we watch this scene, because while there's some knives in it, nothing violent happens, but this scene is jarring. And it's jarring just because of how much Paul has changed since we last saw him. And in the process, we will see a guy who will gain the whole world, but will lose his very self. Let's watch together.